Welcome back to One Winning Pod, where the Ravens absolutely trounced and demolished the Pittsburgh Steelers. Boy, does it feel good to say that. I think they've gone over the Pittsburgh Steeler hump. They sent them to Cabo, and the Ravens are looking forward to the divisional round against the Bills, kind of as the world always intended, it seemed. But first, let's talk about this Steelers game. Let's talk about the last game of their season and how the Ravens just literally ran all over them.
Man, I kind of want to say, in the words of a former Raven after a big win against the Steelers in the past, this ain't the same Ravens, man. We finally saw this dominant game, more or less, that we've been waiting for this team, two halves. I understand the Steelers came back a little bit, but, they were in desperation mode. They were chucking it. A couple touchdowns, in the moment it didn't feel great, but I think that happens. But yeah, just from top to bottom, they dominated all phases of this game, the line of scrimmage, running the ball, passing, pass defense. It just lots of sacks in this game. It was beautiful, man. It was beautiful. And if the Ravens can play with this confidence going forward, it's going to be a heck of a lot for the rest of the AFC to handle when they come into the games.
Yeah. I mean, like you guys said, this is the second game back to back at the bank against the Steelers that the Ravens have just, played big, put up points, and, really just looked outmatched. We're out, matching the Steelers. Obviously I know I missed the other game. I was away that week, so I wasn't able to go, but I was really happy to go to this one and just to see a big win. It was a great game, but yeah, no, I think, just thinking about it too, like, obviously we don't know how long this is going to go. We'll see what happens this week, but I feel like with the, some of the storylines too of just, coming out of that first Steelers game and just the team looking like terrible in that game, losing a close one to the Steelers. I feel like they're, a little bit of threads of just, hey, can the Ravens like beat the Steelers? Like, are they really that good? Like, what does that mean and everything? And I feel like with 2 wins now against the Steelers to kind of really like reverse the narrative a little bit, I feel like it just looks like, it's really good. I think it's going to, I'm sure the team probably wouldn't say anything, but I do feel like, for what it's worth, like trying to get the monkey off their back of like, hey, okay, you've addressed the Steelers, you've seen them all the time, they've had their number. You take care of business against them, and then move on to the opponent, to the other opponents that, obviously I think they probably circled and be like, these are the guys we really have to be on our A game for.
I'm wearing my Nobody Cares Work Harder t-shirt, and I had this thought today that maybe the Ravens lost that way last year, and basically all the years, where they like were really celebrating their successes. Remember the dance scene? And like, I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer here, but I feel like they're just so like nonplussed by their success this year and are so focused on the prize that like I feel like they're really embodying the nobody cares part, And I'm just like really feeling I think that's what I feel is different about the locker room is like they're just accomplishing goals and looking forward, and there's like almost they're not satisfied yet, they're still chasing, and I think that's a good place to be in.
I mean, maybe. I think what you're specifically referring to is that they didn't have the dance party right at the end of the year. But I mean, I feel like they had that, that air about them last year. I can remember after one of the big blowout wins, I think it was against the Lions, there was all that talk of, this doesn't matter. We got, the Super Bowl wasn't won today. So, along those lines. But I mean, I could certainly see it, after the failure of the previous season, maybe they're even more locked in, right?
Yeah.
You learn from failure, right? That if failure is, something that can be eye-opening and give you insight to what you need to work on. And the Ravens, I think, certainly saw some things from in that Chiefs game, and they've worked on some things, and we'll see if the improvements they've made from last year are enough to get them all the way over it. But I think one thing that, is quite clear in this game, what did we all talk about last year? Last year we talked about how the Ravens weren't running the ball enough in the postseason. Maybe not so much against Houston. I mean, that was mainly Lamar. They didn't really get the running backs too much involved, but they certainly didn't get them involved against Kansas City. This year, completely different story, right, man? I mean, like you're saying, running with Derrick Henry and the game plan called by Monken. Man, that play where Henry got that first big run of the game, that 30-plus yarder, where it was him and the Wildcat with likely back there and Lamar going in motion like Henry might be there to pitch it off to him and then get the Steelers guys in motion. I felt like that call was brilliant, and it kind of really just like set the tone of the game. It kept the Steelers guessing, and it just that's where the momentum was won, I think, and they never surrendered it after that play.
Yeah, it was wild. It felt like, I mean, quite honestly, it felt like the Steelers just didn't know what was going on. Even before that play, I mean, you had several runs in a row, and they were just gashing them for big gains every time. I mean, not like long touchdowns or anything, but like 9 yards, 10 yards here, and just continuing to grind out clock and everything. And yeah, I definitely agree. Like that was a great play where they just didn't see it. They didn't know who's going to get the ball. And it wasn't just Henry too. Like Lamar had a couple of good carries in there as well. So yeah, there were so many plays too where you saw like Watt or somebody in the backfield just like completely whiffing and like tackling Henry, and then boop, Lamar's got the ball. He's running 10 yards downfield. So another great play too, Peter, I feel like we should mention it now too, is the I guess like the Henry touchdown, or the second Henry touchdown. That was another one where like they didn't know who was going to get the ball. They were kind of moving left. They had the mesh point. Lamar's holding, and then let Henry go. And honestly, like it was one where like I didn't even see that there was going to be a hole there, but everybody was kind of flowing one way, and then like he had to let it go at like that moment for Henry to have full steam to kind of like go right through the middle of the defense and just outrun everybody. Just a great play of like Lamar and them just like reading leverage. It wasn't even the play call necessarily at that point, but just like reading leverage and then hitting right when the Steelers were overflowing one way, and bam, touchdown. Yeah, if if you want a game to show that the Ravens are leaning in the run game, like this is a big one.
Yeah, I'm trying to find, I think it was something along the lines of like 50-24 rush to pass, if I recall correctly. Just an absolutely absurd amount of running. I saw a stat as well that if Henry was in the game on first down, he got the ball. and he had like 2 touchdowns and like 100 and some yards out of it. The team they announced 300 yards at the end of the game. That was fake news. It was 300, and then they kneeled. You hate to see it. You really do hate to see the kneel and how it impacts these cool numbers, these fun stats. We had the Fangio line broken this year because of a kneel, and then we had 300 in the playoffs broken because of a kneel. But symbolically, I think we could say it was 300. There were some bad spots during the game, so I think it was really 300 for sure. And I think a couple things to point out about this run game. Lamar is like fully unleashed. It's the playoffs, and they are not afraid to use him. And I think that's one of the reasons I think Henry had even more success in this game. Lamar was a real threat. He was running a ball a lot earlier, and I think that kind of really set things up. Kohler's back, 30%, or 30% of the snaps. Played really well and is like really blocking quite nicely. There was a couple plays where he sprung everything. Offensive line has been pretty dominant as of late, also really good. And I think it's humming. If you're able to grind out drives where you run 12 out of 13 times, take off 8 minutes the clock, it's really hard to bounce back. That kind of ball control, the defense being fresh, and conversely, like they were smoked. There's been reports that Patrick Queen was really sick, and I feel bad for him. But the whole defense just looked low effort after the end of those drives. They just looked completely pooped and just wanted to get it over with. This Ravens team and the way they played this week really just it was kind of insulting and in the best way possible. It was just incredible that they just kept running. Everyone knew they were going to run, and they just succeeded and grinded away on these teams, and it was extremely satisfying.
Yeah, and it's I think in some way it's affirming, right? Because the past 2 off seasons, we've heard this, Harbaugh say, we've heard the front office say they want to keep doubling down on the run, keep doubling down on what worked on 2019, recreate 2019. And we keep saying as a fan base, we need to pass more, right? That's what the league is. But, we see ebbs and flows here in how the league works. And it's come back to a game that is really benefiting. It's really benefits you to have a strong running game. I mean, look at the teams left. It's not just the Ravens with Lamar and Derrick Henry. It's obviously the Bills, who we'll talk about shortly, with Josh Allen, James Cook. You got obviously Detroit there with Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley, of course, in Philadelphia. A lot of strong rushing offenses left. And I mean, they just, like you said, the defense was tired of the Steelers because the Ravens just had the long drive starting out with that first one. And, there's so many guys we can highlight here who did such a great job. One guy I think we definitely need to highlight, though, is Roger Rosengarten, man. Roger Rosengarten has had a strong rookie year. We've talked about him all year. We were talking about him before the year, that we were expecting big things out of him. We were even suggesting he might be the starting left tackle in these games when we were talking about the preseason. Obviously Stanley has been the Stanley of old, so that's helped keep him at the left tackle and Rosengarten at right tackle. But, TJ Watt probably was not at full strength for this game, but still, I mean, he was matched up against Rosengarten for a lot of this game, and you just watch the highlights. Rosengarten, time and time again, is keeping TJ Watt at bay and giving Lamar time to throw. Particularly had a great sequence on the touchdown to Justice Hill, giving Lamar that extra time there. Rosengarten was in a pretty long battle there with Watt twisting and turning, trying to get his way to Lamar, and he won and allowed Hill to improvise. Hill revealed after the game that was a total improvisation on his part. He was supposed to be blocking. He saw the hole and just went out there. So, yeah, I mean, so many guys. We could really spend, the entire pod discussing, all the great blocking, everyone who really gave it their all there in this game. But I think Rosengarten is a guy to definitely highlight in this game, particularly because of what he did against a guy who has given the Ravens fits, year in and year out since the Steelers drafted him.
Yeah, great, great play. I think you mentioned, Peter. I think, both, I think for Rosengarten on the blocking and, everybody on the blocking, as well as, just Lamar doing Lamar things as well. Just, knowing exactly when to, move up, move aside, find a crease, make the throw. It was really great play. But yeah, I agree with you too. I feel like, I feel like Watt has definitely been hurting the last couple of weeks. We kind of talked about it in the preview episode that, he hasn't had much of, an impact, at least on like the stat sheet over the last couple of weeks. I feel like we got that Watt this week. I feel like, this has kind of been 2 games in a row where he hasn't had too much of an impact. That seems like an outlier. It just seems like too convenient that he would, just not be playing like his best ball, but not due to injury. I think it's definitely injury affected. But regardless, you have to line up with whoever's across from you. So, and I do think Watt, even when injured, is still probably better than a lot of guys in the league. So, yeah, credit to Rosengarten for playing really well. He's going to have another really good test, I think, this week as well. Watt's kind of an outlier. I feel like a little bit of a freak of, both a speed and power guy. I think, the guys in Buffalo, I think, are probably have a little bit of a different mold, but still, they like to send their pass rushers on and they've got a lot of them. So, yeah, it's good that he's, playing really good football, and you just hope that he continues.
Zay was out in this game, as we anticipated, but interestingly enough, it didn't feel like they changed much of the playbook. Sims and Miller were used as Zay replacements, doing a lot of the motions. Miller was even involved in a couple catches, in a big third down grab. Likely had the most snaps of anyone from a skill position perspective with 80%. He was a difference maker in this game. And of course, Rashad Bateman, although he didn't get like a ton of targets, those targets were really valuable, including a crazy tight window throw that Lamar delivered in the end zone. So everyone stepped up in the brief times that they needed to pass. There was a big catch by Aguilar on the 2-minute drill, or what really is the 80-second drill, because the Ravens seem to want to get you down to like minute 10 before they actually decide to start moving down the field. I guess that's what they're comfortable with. I guess they've done enough practices and they know that that's enough time, so they don't want to leave any other time for anyone else. So I guess I should stop complaining when it's 2 minutes and they start running the ball. It's strategic. They're just trying to get to the actual time they want to start moving those chains. So anyhow, just really cool to see everyone step up in Zay's absence and still be able to produce in the passing game.
Yeah, big strike offense, man. That's what it is these days. We were all getting on Harbs at the beginning of the season for clock management. I think those, for the most part, those issues are all behind them.
Well, it certainly helps, I think, when, as we said, having a great run game where you can take off so much clock. I mean, I don't remember if we have the stats in front of us, Alec. Maybe, you can look it up. But what was the time of possession difference?
Oh, yeah.
I feel like it was almost like a 2-to-1 split. It was just insane. I mean, think about the first half. It was really 2-3 big drives from the Ravens, and
39-33 for Baltimore, 20-27 for Pittsburgh.
Yeah. It's almost 40-20, 2-to-1 ratio, insane. You don't have to worry about timeouts when you've already taken all the time you need and you're up 21-0. So,
well, and I mean the other thing, maybe it destroyed a parlay or two, but their ability to get the ball with 6 minutes left in the game and just to grind out the clock while you had to get first downs, but you had to not do it too quickly. Right? And you had to not go too far past the sticks in order to pull that off. And they did. They got all the way down to the 9-yard line. Remarkably efficient. Usually took 3 downs. Didn't go much farther than they needed to. Very impressive and very disappointing in a way if you had some futures on it. But it was just really just well done. It was funny that people at that point thought the game was over, and they were correct. But they're chanting MVP like crazy. The team's calmed down, and then with about a minute left, once they kind of got that last first down, you saw Harbaugh on the sideline being like, "All right, please clap." Now you can clap. Let's go. And that was a lot of fun. But the way that they dominated time possession and the way that they just imposed their will, the clock out this game. That's, I think, why I wasn't worried. They come back, we're up to 21-0. And I'm like, well, this game feels pretty much over. And they get a strike, and you're like, 21-7 or whatever. And then they get another strike when we got another touchdown. So now they're within 14 again. But I was like, guys, I think we can just run the clock. You're not going to have enough time to get 2 more possessions. If we just keep running the ball like we have been, you're not going to get the ball again. So very beautiful how that worked out. And I think, a very cool formula, keep in your back pocket that hopefully against these other teams you can pull off as well. Where if you get a nice lead, if you can start ball control and just keep it away from that offense, they can only score so much if they don't have that many possessions.
I mostly agree with that. I think that against Pittsburgh, it worked well. And I think for the most part it should, but what I hope they're keeping in mind and, have a handle on is to not get it be, like some of the games we saw at the beginning of the season where, having that more conservative approach made some games dicey, right? I'm thinking back to the Dallas game, thinking back to, the crumbling against the Raiders, long time ago. So, all of the things that led to those, close games should be ironed out. But, I will say watching the game live, my opinion has changed and softened on it, with enough time away from it. But watching it live, I certainly got flashbacks of early in the season with some of that third quarter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's probably worth mentioning though, right? I mean, while the defense played pretty good for the majority of the game, they did have 2 drives where basically, big passing plays down the sidelines, were the difference being 28-0 to 28-14. So, I know a lot of people have talked about, Brandon Stevens, and, I mean, obviously we have on the pod several times of just, challenges, I think, with leaving him on an island. Um, it's so weird because, I feel like, we've talked about him a bit, and just like, how we're, very concerned about it. And like, I'll admit, like, still a little bit concerned, but it's so strange to me because I feel like he's almost in like, he feels like he's in perfect position every time, just
Mm-hmm.
not able to make, the pass deflections that he needs to on this 50-50 balls. And it got me thinking. I know, Peter, you and I talked about this on the walk down, but I feel like against the Steelers, obviously having guys like Pickens, where, they are known for just, those 50-50 balls, now muscling guys. It didn't surprise me, too much to see Steven struggle a little bit in that situation. I know he didn't catch the touchdown against him. It was actually Wiggins, but he did also let up a couple passes to him. Um, but I was wondering, just like for future matchups as well, is that something that, like, are we going to see what we saw against the Steelers game? Are we going to see that in other matchups, or is that just like a byproduct of the Steelers and like the offensive personnel that they have? Just looking forward to the Bills a little bit. They don't have a lot of guys who are in that mold, so maybe we might be okay there. I would much rather have Stevens let up a pass and make an immediate tackle versus giving up a 50-50 ball in the end zone, for example. So we'll obviously see, but I feel like that hasn't really changed. It's still a risk. We know that could be our one of our Achilles heels, but um, you know we're gonna keep talking about it until it stops.
They were unable to run the ball, which helped because they stayed relatively committed to it in the early part of the game. And then it was just those big explosives. It's bad when the Steelers fan behind you cheers for the introduction of Brandon Stevens. Um, the word is out to even the fan bases that that's who you need to attack. Still got 100% of snaps, exposure therapy at his finest. I think he plays quite well when we're in the dime packages, which we only got to, maybe 10% of the time, a little bit more, maybe 15% of the time in this particular game. I would like to see in more of the passing downs, more White personally, but out of practice, who knows what they're going to do going forward. But it is one of the scarier parts of the team right now. You had Hamilton just like absolutely furious on the Van Jefferson touchdown with Stevens. Yeah, I don't know. It's tough. I feel like that's the one place. And we always talk about it, like Andy Reid. He loves picking, on your weak link, and that just one of the things that kind of scares me. And just wondering, how are we going to adjust? Are we waiting till the last minute to show an adjustment to not let there be film on it? I don't know, man. Just a little scary.
I think it is what it is at this point. I think the book is kind of out on Stevens. I hear what you're saying about White. I think he's made some good plays. I think he's made some bad plays too. He gave up the pass to Williams. That was a couple plays before that. The play you were just talking about, where Hamilton was yelling at Stevens afterward. He's given up some other plays in some other games. He's made some good plays too. I think that it's kind of that is the weakness of this defense right now, right? They solve the biggest problems, but ideally you're not putting Stevens in some of these situations where teams are able to target him with the jump ball, right? You're playing White less sparingly than you currently are, I think. But I mean, everywhere else, they pretty much, fit it. Ardarius Washington had another very strong game today. He was, on Saturday, getting my days mixed up. He was all over the field, made some great tackles. Several tackles he made, were preventing the sticks from moving. We had a very impressive play early in the game. knocking Freiermuth out, a guy who's, has a good deal of size on him. And, he was able to stop him right in his tracks, get no momentum. I mean, he's continuing to be a great part here. Obviously, Hamilton and Marlon's doing great. It's just, Wiggins is pretty good, but he's a rookie. He's still going to make some mistakes. And then I think Stevens and White, teams know, what they can do well and where they can attack them. So the good news I think we can look at is just, you can still win a Super Bowl with weaknesses on either side of the ball, right? I mean, I feel like Stevens right now is basically what Kerry Williams was for the Ravens back in 2012. I mean, everyone knew how to attack Kerry Williams to expose what his weaknesses were in the pass defense that year, and yet they're still able to win. He had that pick again to seal the game against New England. I believe that was him. So, yeah, I mean, if we're looking at what to be concerned about for this team going forward, I think that's first and foremost, the deficiencies of Wiggins, Stevens, and White, probably in that, order from least worried to most worried, in my opinion. I guess Stevens more than White because he's, like you're saying, he's playing more snaps. But yeah, it's just something they're going to have to continue to try and compensate for, just like Zach Orr's been doing all year, and Dean Pease is obviously there helping that staff as well. And it's just another reason why the offense just needs to keep scoring points, because this defense can slow teams down. But how many times are they going to shut out, teams going forward? Probably not too many times. If you run the simulations enough, you have some pretty good offenses that they're going to be going against.
Like, one more thing we got to talk about before MVPs. Another concern that I think we have for this team right now, punt returner.
Oh man.
Yep.
Yeah, so obviously, Steven Sims picked him up a couple of weeks ago. We talked about him being involved in the offense, and the Zay role, had a fumble early on, a punt return, and I think one other one that looked a little shaky. And it definitely seemed like near the end of the game that he was not touching the ball anymore. I was out there, but just not touching the ball. So that I feel is a little concerning right now, and I feel like we don't have another answer. Obviously, kick returner, I think Keaton is available if he's able to get an opportunity, but everyone's just kicking touchbacks these days, so just the way it is. But yeah, punt return, I feel like I don't know what's going to happen with that one.
It's very scary. It's not the place you expect to have problems. We feel like there's players on this team that could give you a little bit more confidence back there, but I don't know. Hardy's been apparently having some personal issues as well as injury, so we'll see if he's available. I know his practice window opened, but we'll see. You mentioned Keaton. You mentioned, Tylen's done it before. I don't know, man. It's not great. Yeah, because you want them to punt to you. You do. You just don't want it to be like a huge swing of field position in the opposite direction, like a free 40, 50 yards. So very tricky. I did also want to bring up, though, something about the defense, but Peter, do you have anything you wanted to say about punt returner situation?
Just that I echo everything Chris said. I feel like we were talking about it. Gosh, even the first punt, I remember saying, just don't fumble it.
You did.
And I apologize. I don't know what I was thinking.
You said the F word.
I just, and lo and behold, luckily that was recovered. But man, yeah, it's an underrated concern. We're talking about it. Some others are talking about it, but it's one that isn't getting as big a headlines as the secondary outside of the safeties and Humphrey, like we were talking about, or Justin Tucker's missed kicks prior to the bye week. But yeah, it's a huge thing. I mean, an entire game can be changed, just because of one mishandled punt. So hopefully everything's good there. But yeah, it's something that you're holding your breath now when the punt is in the air.
You are. But the one thing I did want to bring up about the defense too, though, is 4 sacks on Russell Wilson in this game, 2 by Namdi Madubuike, and 1 by Odafe Owe and Michael Pierce. Owe really took over the game in the fourth quarter. He had Wilson scrambling, and he had Wilson get the ball out quick and overthrow Pickens, and then he sacked him the next play. And that really just blew up the sequence. They were driving a little bit, and then it was like, 3rd and 31 or something ridiculous, right? Or third and a mile, and they just gave up. I mean, they didn't actually, but you know what I mean. They got knocked out. So, really cool to see him step up. I feel like he was definitely an MVP candidate. And then, like I said, Nnamdi with 2 sacks. They weren't the biggest sacks necessarily, but they were still awesome. And it just reminds you why we paid the guy. Maybe he didn't have gaudy stats this year, but he was disruptive all year long. He is a big reason that the Ravens have found success on defense. And I think in the playoffs, he might actually be even more valuable. Yeah, these are the kind of games where the stars really show, I feel like. And having that little extra juice matters. And he certainly has it.
All right. Anything else we need to talk about? Should we do MVPs?
Let's do it.
MVPs.
All right. I guess I can go first. I feel like this is an obvious one. Derrick Henry. I mean, what more to say?
Someone has to say it.
Somebody's got to say it. Somebody's got to say it. Yeah, I felt really nice to wear his jersey. You know what? I told you guys in the game. I'll tell it again to everyone on air here. But like, part of it feels so weird, man. It feels so weird. Coming, back like 2019, the horrid memories of just him absolutely crushing our playoff dreams, and then we came down from a really massive high because of Derrick Henry. It feels so weird to see him on the other side, but we're embracing him because he is going to be carrying us to hopefully throughout the playoffs and Super Bowl. And it feels good to wear the jersey. It feels good that maybe I had a little bit of juju. Not that he needs it. Of course, the man is a absolute physical freak. Freak of nature. Just absolute unit. But it felt good to wear his jersey and see him with a huge performance.
It's got to be the weirdest Ravens signing, like turned rival to fan favorite I can think of. I can't think of a crazier one. I mean, what was
Derek Mason too?
Yeah, I think like
but
going back to Mason and McNair, but it's just like even both those, it's like as good as they were. Like I really feel like it was more the Titans defense that you really looked at in those matchups that were like, okay, those are reasons that we lost the game, which had nothing to do with obviously McNair and Mason, great players, but we had a defense that could slow down that offense. So it's their defense that was making it tough for our challenged offense. But it's just an absolutely bizarre timeline, and I'm loving it. I'm loving it, and we'll get to it when we talk about the Bills preview. But man, we'll get to it. But yeah, for me, I'm going along those same lines, except I'm giving it to one of the guys who's blocking for him. I already talked a bunch about him, but I loved Roger Rosengarten's game. It wasn't just his work against Watt. He was great in the run block as well, and doing a bunch of little stuff. Great rookie year he's had, man, and is looking even better in the playoffs.
Nice. I want to go likely, but I don't want to give it all to the offense. I just thought he stepped up nicely with his 5 catches and his top snap earning, particularly in a challenging week without Zay. But I mean, I'll just go with Owe, who I just brought up. I mean, his ability to kind of close out the game there. He made other key plays, showed off his speed. Just a really great player, man. And maybe even like a little bit of Nnamdi too with his 2 sacks. I mean, it was just the defense was really solid in this game. I don't want it to be overlooked because of the freakish running performance that really captured the hearts and minds of the public. But give it a nod to some of those defensive players. Well, you mentioned it. Going to play the Bills in Orchard Park. As intended, man. I thought maybe the Broncos would have a fight, and this wouldn't be the case. The Broncos looked really good on that first possession. They never scored again. And the Bills, who didn't look that good in the first half, did score multiple times. In the second half, pulled away and really made it look like a lopsided game. And I mean, it was. It was a lopsided game after that initial part. Looked like they gave them all they had really early, and that was it. It kind of folded. The Bills dominant in the run game in that game. I think that really was one of the ways that they, were able to set the tone and have success on offense. So yeah, that's going to be our opponent, the Bills.
It was a funny weekend, right? I feel like, in the chat, you guys were ribbing on me for saying Ravens Steelers was going to be close, and then I was saying the same thing back to you guys because you said that the Bills Broncos game is going to be close, and in the end, everyone who picked lots of points was right. It's just the Ravens took care of business quite well, and the Bills took care of business quite well. Sure, we could nitpick, how the Bills did it. I agree with you. Yeah, it took them a little bit to pull away, but once they did, there was no question. And even before that, I mean, I think the Broncos caught them off guard for a second there. Bo Nix, got Troy Franklin, who's had a roller coaster of a season, and with that deep touchdown pass. But then they didn't give up any points after that. This is a very good team. They play in a very tough place to play. It's going to be cold. It's going to be the coldest kickoff that Lamar has experienced. And, I think that a lot of the Bills fans, at least from what I've read, are viewing that as an advantage, and maybe it is. But, at the same time, there's a lot of players on this team who are ready for cold weather football. The Ravens are always built to be playing cold weather football. So, I think it's going to be a really exciting game. I think that the Bills are a very talented team, and obviously we're a very talented team. So, I mean, we'll see what happens, but I feel like both these teams have changed quite a bit since that Week 4 Sunday night matchup where Derrick Henry ran all over them for that 35-10 win.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think, I feel like the offense for the Bills, I think, took a while to kind of get where it's at right now, but I think we even saw some signs of it early in Week 4 that they're trying to transform this offense a little bit, so from being a really pass happy Josh Allen throw the ball over the field to more of a I guess I'd call it like run first offense, although like it's no disrespect to Josh or anything. It's just like they're running the ball more to be able to put Josh in more favorable passing situations and not have him throw the ball, 40, 50 times a game. And, like you said, like one of you guys said, like James Cook had a really big game against the Broncos. He's had a really good, season, been, really, really active in a lot of rush yards. Obviously not the Henry Saquon tier, but I would say solidly tier 2 this year. Been very active, lots of touchdowns as well. So, I mean, that's the kind of offense I think they want to run. And then, as far as their passing options, it feels like they have a lot of talented guys that, I'm not sure if they're necessarily wide receiver 1 material, but I feel like all of them are kind of in the 2 to 3 range. You would probably feel good about them as a complementary piece on your team. But, guys like, Coleman, Cooper, Shakir, there are probably more of them that I'm missing, but they've got a lot of them on that team.
Curtis Samuel, Mac Hollins, they got so many.
Yeah. You definitely are hitting on something there, Chris. They are running the ball a lot more just in this game against the Broncos. 23 attempts for Cook, 120 yards and a touchdown. Allen ran 8 times for 46 yards, 5.8 yards per carry. And then even Ty Johnson was in there being effective, 9 carries for 44 yards. So you're looking at over 200 yards on the ground. They played well. And the other thing to look at, like you mentioned, is their wide receivers. Not really a single guy that you look to as dominant. It's kind of wild. I think it was something along the lines of no one went over 700, 800 yards for him in the season. And just kind of passing it all around. They had a remarkable amount of people involved in the offense this year, scoring points. And I think that in a way is their Achilles heel. I feel like when he drops back, like, he's going through his progressions, obviously, but there's no like gotta have it guy. He doesn't have like one of those guys he can lean on. And I think that's become that comes to his own call. Then he calls his own number to try to save the day. So, what I noticed though right away watching them is how incredibly athletic and dominant their offensive line is in all regards. Giving him time in the pocket, one of the least sacked. I think he is the least sacked quarterback in the league this year, Josh Allen. Obviously, if they're running for 200 yards, the offensive line's doing some good work too. And their ability to get tough yards and tough situations on third down, gotta have his stuff, was really on point in this game against the Broncos too. So I think that's something to really pay attention to. Is just this is the biggest team since the Eagles, in my opinion, that can run the ball and have success and really test the Ravens' number one rush defense. A lot of people just don't even bother trying to run against us. They know it's going to not be successful. They know that they might have better luck passing the ball. This team's going to try to run, and we're going to have to respond.
Yeah, I mean, their offensive line, look, it might have weaknesses, but you got to watch a lot of tape to find it. I mean, there was that one play, I believe it was around 4 minutes. Yeah, I'm watching it right now. 4 minutes and 14 seconds left in the first quarter. James Cook runs for like 10 yards, and then his entire offensive line just bear hugs him, and Rugby pushes him forward an additional like 9 yards. I mean, this line, yeah, you're right about that on the sacks. Josh Allen was only sacked 14 times this season, and he played 17 games. Just incredible.
16.
Well, okay.
Yeah, he had a single snap in the last one.
Okay, fine. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Still,
no,
I
just
games.
But no, still, less than one sack a game. Less than one sack a game.
Right on that. Yeah, I mean that was the least amount of quarterbacks who played. Even if we say just 16 games, that was the least
it's still
amount.
impressive. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah. I mean, so Kirk Cousins played 14 games and he got sacked 28 times. 16 games, 28 for Stafford. I mean, if we're talking about quarterbacks who played at least 16 games, the next closest you have is 23 sacks that Lamar Jackson, had to suffer. So, and that's still pretty far from 14. So that's great. They're doing really good there. Just like Lamar this year, Josh Allen really is not turning the ball over, which is kind of a big deal. Cause I mean, that used to be a criticism of his, right? I mean, last year, obviously had a great season, but also, 18 picks for a guy who's completing over 65% of his passes and 4,000 yards and winning as many games as he does. That's a high number. You don't want to see that. Part of that, I think, is definitely related to what you were talking about, Chris, the shift in offense, not putting as much on Allen's shoulders, run the ball with James Cook and Ray Davis and these other guys, and we've seen that. I mean, Josh Allen, he attempted the least amount of passes this year since his second year in the league in 2019. 3,700 yards through the air compared to 4 previous 4,000 yards plus seasons. And he's had the highest QBR of his career this year. I think that, and it doesn't really come as a surprise, right? That was always been a criticism of this Bills offense in years prior to this, that they didn't run the ball virtually at all, right? I mean, Devin Singletary, Zach Moss were there, but not really getting carries terribly often. It was really just Allen running and passing. So, yeah, I think this balanced approach has really worked well for them. It's cut down on mistakes, like I just said, and it's allowing them to do longer drives. And it's something that the Ravens are going to have to keep an eye on because because the Bills got down so quickly in that week 4 matchup, we didn't really see that offense from them. They were in catch-up mode right away. And I mean, James Cook averaged over 4 yards on the ground, but he only got, 8-9 attempts. They didn't really commit to the run. So if maybe the Ravens get up quick again, but if they don't, I think they're going to see a much different offensive strategy from the Bills than when they played them back in September.
Yeah, I feel like it's really tricky to kind of glean a lot of information out of the last game because you look at it and you're like, okay, his completion percentage is really low. He was sacked 3 times as well. That was the season high. 3 out of 14 as well. that was a significant amount just in one game. But then you look at it, you're like, okay, well, Henry started out with the 88-yard rushing touchdown and kind of opened the game, and kind of spiraled out there. So like, I feel like that doesn't really tell you much about this game unless the Ravens were to do the same thing. Obviously, doing that in a away environment, I think would be pretty tough, pretty difficult. Not to mention all the other factors that are going to go into it. But yeah, I mean, it'll definitely be a test. Alec, I kind of think back to what you said with like Matabike, of trying to lean on guys like him, Van Noy, and just really trying to set the tone early, throwing him off his game. That is one. I feel like that is something that the Ravens have been able to do with Josh for the last couple of matchups that we've had, is really put him under duress and throw him off his game so he's not as accurate with the football. He's still going to make some of those crazy plays, just as Lamar does, extend the play and make crazy throws that only he can play. Those are going to happen, but it's the like routine passing where you need to get a couple yards on like second, third down to be able to continue drives. It's like, I feel like that is where you can rattle him a little bit. And so, yeah, just having the vets on the defense to kind of step up and provide that consistent pressure and allow him to not get into a rhythm, I think are going to be really key. We'll see if they can do it.
Do we want to turn to the defense and the challenges they'll pose for the offense?
Yeah, we can certainly look at that. And that side of the ball is another one. I feel like in some ways it's just like what we were talking about last game, right? The Ravens had a good deal of offensive success in the second matchup against the Steelers. But Steelers were suffering some injuries, and those guys were healthy for that game, but it was essentially the same result. Now, in this game, the Bills had some injuries to some linebackers in that September game. One of their safeties who was playing in that game also exited early with a concussion. So, you could make the argument that some of what the Ravens did was aided by those injuries, but also at the same time, I think we can also say that even if those guys were in, there's a big difference between, a career game that Henry had, or one of many career games he's had, and, him having a more quote unquote pedestrian game for him. I think would still been like 120, 130 yards, who knows? We'll get a healthier Bills defense going against Henry this game, but yeah, I mean, I think something that we pointed out in the notes is, while this is a talented defense, they've got a lot of good players. The fact of the matter is, they're not the biggest, right? And they're a team that, we know that the Ravens are probably going to do a lot of heavy, bring in the extra linemen, bring in ReCAP, and Henry himself is big enough, on his own. It feels like that is, when we're starting at this game, is still going to be the first advantage the Ravens are going to try and have, establishing the run with Henry and have the Bills defense prove that they can slow him down.
Yes. The team does seem a little bit lighter in the pants, but they have great length and great penetrators. Rousseau is one of the guys that I was really impressed with when I was watching the film against Denver. Obviously, every Bills fan on Twitter will let you know about Milano being back and his ability to snuff out quarterback runs and to mirror them and spy them. Very effective against Bo Nix, for sure. We'll see against Lamar. A little bit different. But I mean, it's not to downplay him. I think he's one of the best in the league to do it. But what gives me a lot of confidence is the defense made to beat Lamar in the Steelers really struggled with that this week. They have invested the most money of any team in the NFL on their defense, and that was not enough. Some would say that they needed to double their investment in order to stop Lamar. Maybe at least that night they did. So it gives me hope that this could be repeatable against Buffalo, but it's a different kind of team. You got to make sure that you don't throw any interceptions. Obviously, I think that they're pretty skilled at being in position to do that. Obviously, again, Bo Nix is Bo Nix, but just watching the way that they collapse on the ball. I think the way that you beat them is throwing over the middle. You have to dare and throw over the middle. That seems to be the weak part, but that's a tough place to operate and can be tricky. So I'm just I'm cautiously optimistic that they can beat this defense. I think they have the tools for it, but they're no slouch for sure.
Yeah, I think it'll be tricky too. Just weather's always a factor in Buffalo, obviously. I mean, you guys know I'm planning on going up, so I'll get to experience some of the cold and wind. Honestly, I think the wind's going to be like the big one. Apparently the from what I read, the stadium's like built like underground partially. So like the upper sections get a lot of wind because there's nothing to prevent it from coming in. Obviously, but how that plays down the lower sections and actually on the field, I don't know the answer to that. But still, I think it is, probably going to be a little bit different than MNC, even though both stadiums are outside. Just the peculiarities of the geography around it, which is going to affect that. But yeah, I would have to agree with you guys though. Like, I mean, come on. It's like the story of the last offseason or the last postseason was, we didn't run the ball enough. It seems like that's got to be the bread and butter. Like you've leaned on that so much in the regular season. You already leaned on it so much in the last game against the Steelers. Like, I don't see why you would want to throw that out and say like, hey, we're going to go like a pass heavy offense. Particularly with Zay, we still don't know if he's going to play. Obviously, I think Harbaugh kind of gave an update saying like, hey, he doesn't need to practice. Like if he's good enough and it won't hurt him, like, we'll let him go. But, that doesn't tell us, yes, he's going to play. It just means there's a chance. So, if even with Bateman playing really well and the tight ends obviously playing really well, like I don't think that throwing the ball a lot would be what the Ravens want to do. So, I would have to think like, Monken, you got to pull out all the stops to make sure you're not in a position where this team has to do that. Because at that point, now you're relying a lot of guys like Aguilar, Wallace, Sims, Walker, for example, to try and make big plays when a lot of those guys really unproven to kind of make big plays in those situations when they absolutely need to. So I'm with you. Give it to Henry, give it to him as much as you can and see what happens.
Yeah, agreed. I think, I guess my biggest question, and I, obviously it's hard to say, but like we were talking about the ability of the Ravens to have these really long, drawn out drives and how they control the game in that way in time possession. How do you anticipate time possession and game flow going in this kind of game? Do you think that it's going to be a little bit more balanced and that, Buffalo can give us a taste of their own medicine with the strategic running, and being able to methodically go down the field and get you in bits and bops. But like, what do you guys think? I have a hunch about how it's going to work game flow wise, but I was just curious your thoughts.
I mean, I think honestly, with the temperature and the winds, and with what these two defenses are, I think we're going to see a similar game flow with a little more scoring. I don't think it's going to be as bad as 2020, but I think that it's going to be a similar type of game. Not much in the big passing game, a lot of running. I think that we're going to see a lot of Andrews and Likely again, a lot of slants, and I think that the Bills are going to try and do the same thing they did against the Broncos. A lot to their tight ends, a lot to Shakir and Samuel. Curtis Samuel seems to be a guy they've really finally unlocked, and is a guy I think that the Ravens really should have a game plan for. He could be a sneaky good player in this matchup for them. But yeah, I mean, I just view these teams as so balanced. I think that this last game, the game on Sunday night back in September, was an anomaly. I think that it's going to be tight, and I think time of possession is going to be pretty even in my guess.
Yeah, I would have a hard time saying that it would be as lopsided as it was against the Steelers. Again, like even with the Steelers, like they want to run the ball, they've never really been good at running the ball the last couple of years. So even if they wanted to try to play that game, they just they're not as good at it. I think their yards per carry was something like definitely under 3, probably under 2, but yeah, but for the Bills, obviously they have the success doing it. and it wouldn't surprise me if if they were able to get the Ravens off the field. Say the Ravens get the ball first or something like that. If they were able to get them off the field, it wouldn't surprise me to try to do what we do and take up a bunch of time and just limit the amount of scoring. So I'm kind of leaning right now probably toward Peter. If Zay were healthy, maybe that might be a different story. Like that. I mean, obviously, we're talking about like where the strengths of the team are and where we think they match up best, just like pound for pound. But I mean, if you have all your horses, and you just want to let it rip sometimes to kind of catch them off balance, that could work too. But I'm not sure how comfortable I feel with that. Only really having like Bateman and like maybe Likely as like deep passing options. Like I don't know if I trust anybody else to really like make those big plays down the field in the passing game.
I anticipate longer drives in this game as well from both sides. I think this will be a game that there'll be less possessions than average in, really highlighting the importance of turning drives into touchdowns and not field goals. I think that's going to be another big key to the game. And yeah, I'm anticipating each team to have maybe 1 to 2 less possessions than they normally do in a game, closer to 9 instead of 11. And I also, like I said, think both teams will clock like a 6+ minute drive. So, and maybe, whole length of the field kind of situation. So that's, I think, the big part for me. I see the under as a very good bet if you're into that kind of thing. And yeah, I just, that's my hunch. Kind of like what you're saying, Peter. Not the high scoring matchup.
So I guess one thing hypothetical we should also talk about in this game. So we're talking so much about how, we expect that the Ravens should be able to run again on the Bills. And, it's funny. I was thinking about this, how good it is to have Derrick Henry on our side. I mean, just think about all the sweat and stress we would think about how in the world the Ravens going to slow down Derrick Henry after all those matchups, how much the defense had to sell out and try and eventually would in that wild card playoff game, finally bottle him up. Gosh, I still remember that regular season game in 2020 where it seemed like they had him, but then the Titans came back and man, that last big run Henry had, and they just showed Derek Wolfe just like incredulous, holding his hips and kneeling on the ground. Like the Ravens had given them all they could have, and it still wasn't enough. But let's suppose the Bills do stop the run and they limit Jackson to a bit. What do we think is the key to then finding, a way in a cold weather game where there's wind against this Bills secondary, to light a spark in the offense? I think, Alec, you already started on hitting this with, identifying that maybe up the middle it would be a good spot for the Ravens to attack through the air.
It is. I would say that the motion game they were doing, even with the absence of Zay, was really nice to see that it wasn't gone from the offense. I think it helps you, read the defense better and better key in on where your progression should go. Furthermore, I think there's a lot to be said about just getting the ball out quick and letting some yak happen. That's not something that actually happened much against the Steelers. It mostly was air yards that contributed to the passing attack. There wasn't too much yak. You might look to see if you can spring that in a game. The screen game, I think, is a way as well to counter if they're really clogging the run. And I think, we didn't really talk about it in the last game, but Justice Hill is a big addition to this team being healthy again. Great player, got a touchdown, great awareness. And I think he could be a change of pace guy to help you out if you're unable to run the ball with Lamar and Henry, which just feels like a fantasy land. But I do think it's worth entertaining because you need to have a counterpunch ready.
Right. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I agree with you, but we got to talk about, well, what if that happens?
Yeah. It feels so hard to defend. It feels so tricky when those two guys are on their A game. It's just like game over. But I do think it's worthwhile to talk about. And I think that's how I would do it. And I would say it's one of those things that I wouldn't abandon. If they're stopping it, see if these counterpunches open things up a bit so that you can go back to it. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about balance and keeping them on their toes.
Yeah, I mean, as you were kind of talking about Justice Hill, Alec, I was thinking just before of like, I feel like we've been calling for it for a while now and really haven't gotten it. But like, could this be a game where like Keaton Mitchell can be involved?
I didn't say it on purpose because I've been burned so much.
I mean, I don't know. I mean,
But I
like
agree with you, man.
you want to. I mean, you want a guy who's got a lot of speed, and you don't necessarily need somebody to run routes on the field. Like Keaton's the guy. You know what I mean? So even like throwing him in that Sims role and that Zay role, for even just like a play or two, like that could be one to like spring a drive open. Could be an option.
Yeah, I think the good thing is that unlike years past, like even with Zay out, there's so many guys who can step up and make plays. I think Bateman's obviously shown that. Likely, I think continues to be a guy who's going to be a thorn in the side of defenses in the playoffs. We saw him have a very good game with the opportunities he was given against Pittsburgh. I think that he could once again be a matchup nightmare here for the Bills. I don't think that, with all due respect to their linebackers, I think that's another matchup where likely can win. And I think you guys really brought up another great point with Justice Hill. You're already hitting on my bold prediction I've written down, but yeah, I think Justice Hill is another guy who it's great that we have him healthy. He has been, he's stepped up a ton in games where the Ravens just didn't have, all the normal things working as they could be. So yeah, I think that the good news is there's a lot of options, right? If for some reason the game goes a direction we're not expecting it, a lot of playmakers, maybe not all of them are say all pro worthy, but a lot of very good solid players for us and them, man. I mean, you look at this, both these offenses, so many like very good, high quality tier 2 skill position players on both sides of the ball.
Truly, it's a time for those bold predictions.
I think so, and I guess I can transition right into it. My bold prediction here is the Bills are going to be so focused on Lamar and Henry. Justice Hill's going to have himself a pretty good game. I'm going to say 2 touchdowns for Justice Hill in this game.
That's really bold.
It is really bold. It is really bold, but I think that this is going to be a Justice Hill game, and I think it's going to be a tight one, low scoring, like we said, at least low scoring relative to the NFL today. 20-17 Ravens. It's going to be a tight one.
Bold prediction. I think that in this game, well, I kind of already outlaid it. I think there'll be longer possessions. I think both teams will have some pretty big moments, just impressive moments. Just looking back on last week's bold predictions, Fields didn't see a whole drive. They just weren't interested in that kind of aggression. Likely for 100 yards, that was a good idea, right? But didn't quite get there just because of lack of volume. But I think the spirit of that idea was right. Then Tucker 2 for 2 for Revenge game. He just kicked extra points. they didn't kick field goals. If they did, maybe a parlay would have been hit. But nevertheless, the thing I'm looking at, if I'm trying to get a bold prediction that's actually going to hit, I think that the Ravens will have 3 50-yard plus rushers. So basically saying that Hill's going to get in on the action. Maybe it'll be Keaton, but I'm thinking it's going to be Hill. I think they're going to stick to the ground game. Now, what does it mean for the score? Going back and forth on this. Spoiler, I'm not going to pick the Ravens to lose the rest of the year. I don't know if I picked them to lose this year, and I'm not starting in the playoffs. I'll tell you what. I really do feel good about the Ravens. I was surprised to see it flipped so quickly again, from a Bills favorite to a Ravens favorite in the betting markets. Like I mentioned, the over-under is 51.5. It's going to be under, in my opinion. I think it's going to be 24-17 Ravens. It'll feel close the whole time, but I think near the end of the game, I don't think the Ravens are going to have to come from behind in this game. I think that they'll get an early lead. Maybe not always in the lead, but an early lead, and it'll kind of just be back and forth a little bit. But I don't think that they're going to have to come from behind.
Sounds good. And
Okay.
you are correct. You have never not picked the Ravens to lose all year. We have to go all the way back to, if we don't want to include Week 18, when the Ravens rested starters. You did pick the 49ers to win in Week 16, which is the first and only
on
time.
Christmas? That was such a mistake.
I know. And you'd pick the Ravens the entirety of the year.
See, that's what happens. You know, you think you pick the Ravens to lose the game, they don't lose, right? So maybe I should pick them to lose in the playoffs, but they're not going to lose.
Literally the only non-Week 18 game that you have picked the Ravens to lose in the past 3 years.
That's pretty egregious, honestly, and a little irresponsible on my end. My apologies to everybody.
I mean, we've been pretty confident this year. Chris has picked the Ravens to lose to the Chiefs, but has picked the Ravens all other games. I have picked the Ravens in all but 3 games, and the Ravens are 2-1 in those games where I picked them to lose. So
nice.
Not that means anything, but Alec brought it up. I had to check the books.
Well, Alec, I'm with you. Peter, you said it. I haven't picked against the Ravens since Week 1, and I didn't like that I was right then. But I'm not going to pick against them now. If I wasn't confident about this game, I wouldn't be going up. So I feel pretty good about this one.
Can we just mention how hysterical it is that you had family canvassing for your appearance? I just love that for you. I think that's so great.
I know, it's pretty funny. Yeah, it is pretty funny. It's also funny that Katie's not going to be joining me either, so it's just going to be a little awkward. They'll be like, "Oh, where is she?" Like, well, not here. It's just me. But yeah, no, that was quite funny. Also funny that my mom had offered the night of and be like, "Well, you don't have to take your son with you. Like, you can leave him here." And I'm like, "Well, that was kind of the other point, is to go up there to give him time with my mother-in-law." But yeah, anyway. Anyway, back to the Ravens. I feel good about this one. I don't know. I feel like in past, obviously, past results don't always predict the future and everything. The Ravens have just matched up really well with Allen. Even in the games that they have won, it wasn't because of Allen. It was because of their defense. And I definitely believe, and I think a lot of people definitely believe, that the really the only teams to beat the Ravens are themselves. And I don't say that to disrespect the Bills, but I say that and I'm pretty confident that we're going to find some way to win this game. It may not be our traditional formula, but I think I believe, man. I just believe this is the narrative that's going to take us through. But in any case, I'm going to pick the Ravens to win. I'm going to say 24-20 Ravens, a little bit closer to Alec. My bold prediction, I'm feeling like I want to manifest a defensive bold prediction here, because the offensive one, it's either just going to be Henry Rosen over everybody or something else. So I want to go defense. I'm going to say that the Ravens win the turnover battle here. And I don't know how many picks or fumbles or anything in there, but I think that there's going to be at least one interception off of Allen. My hope, my best bet would probably be Ardarius. I feel like he's got his hands on his football the last couple of weeks, and the one against the Steelers, it was honestly good that he dropped, because otherwise we would have lost a ton of yards. I just feel like Allen's gonna roll out of the pocket, try to pull an Allen thing and throw it downfield or something. Ardarius is gonna be the one to pick it off.
He's been playing so well. His ability to make those stands at the sticks and be like, "No, you're not getting that last yard," have been incredible. The hit that he laid on Calvin Austin, the fact that Calvin Austin caught that's like a 1 in 20.
Oh yeah,
it was crazy. Just super impressive play. The guy is out of his mind right now, and I really hope he's a Raven long term. I hope they can find a deal that makes sense. He's the kind of guy I love rooting for and watching. Great pick. Any final thoughts, people? What do you think? What do you think, guys? You feeling good?
I'm feeling good, man. I'm feeling good. I don't
Chris
feel
is feeling good. He's going up.
Yeah,
Love it.
Man, this is playoffs. It's what it's all about. Do I feel like the Ravens are guaranteed to win? No, but do I feel like they got a great shot and maybe a better shot than losing? Yeah.
I feel that way. I'm eating up the narrative stuff, guys. I really am. The quarterback age, what happened last year, just the way that the it's lining up. The divisional round in 2012 was a game to be remembered, the Mahal Miracle, and yeah, I'm eating it up, man. I feel really good about this team, and now they just got to finish, and super exciting. Let us know your predictions. Feel free to leave a comment on the YouTube video or send us a message on a microblogging platform of your choice, or even email us if you're old school. Feel free to reach out at OneWinningPod everywhere you can find us. That'll wrap things up, and good luck, Chris. I hope that you have a really positive experience up there, and I hope that you bring home a win. Go Ravens.